Hello and welcome to the Political Orphanage, a home for plucky misfits and problem solvers. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton, and I plumb forgot to check and see who won the election. I went to bed early last Tuesday, and then I woke up the following day and had a lot to do, had to work on the shed, and just forgot to check, But this morning, I went down to my local bookstore to get a coffee and purchase a couple of tomes that I've been meaning to crack open, and I remembered to buy a newspaper and see who won the election. And it turns out that Donald Trump won the 2024 election. So if you're in the same boat as me and you just didn't even think to check in on this particular issue until about a week later, I am breaking it to you. But for most people, I imagine that you probably checked the outcome of the election within a day or two of when the election took place. It's not news to you. I will note that I am in a very different place with this election than I was back in 2016. In 2016, when Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, I was besought. In fact, there is a picture of me. I was working at News Corp at the time at Fox Business, and there's a picture of me where I have my hands on my head and I'm just gaping at the television screen. And I'd been like that for 30 consecutive minutes. And somebody thought it was so funny they took a picture of me. I was very much addled by that election. And while I remain not a Trump guy, I wasn't rooting for him, my reaction this election is just a lot more grounded. I am merely frustrated and disappointed. Now, granted, it is possible that my brain has melted. Media's been weird these last 4 to 8 years. Maybe I've just become inured to all of this and my brain is melted and my internal fire alarm is no longer functioning properly. But overall, though, I feel like I'm just not freaking out the way that I did previously, which I take as a win. And I hope that for anybody that is freaking out, you take as a source of stability in your own life. Though I do know quite a few people who are besought and apoplectic with the results of this particular election. In fact, I know a lot of people who are more worried about Donald Trump now than they were in 2016. I'm the other way around. In 2016, I wasn't sure what he was about, and the sheer spectacle and ideological question mark paired with all the rhetoric, I found that very disturbing. Now I kind of know what he's about, and I'm less worried about it. But for a lot of people, they're in the other boat. They see Donald Trump as now knowing how to govern and being more disposed towards being to execute his agenda, and they're very worried, more worried than they were in 2016. So on today's episode, I've invited on two very smart friends of mine who voted in opposite directions in this most recent election. One voted for Donald Trump, and the other voted for Kamala Harris. And I want to get them together here on the show to discuss that contest and its results and what it means about America and what it means about the future. For two reasons, I'm doing this. First, I want to give people who are freaked out, not me who are merely disappointed, but who are qualitatively more freaked out, just in a different state. I want to give them the ability to articulate precisely what they are afraid will come to pass. Not, I am sad that we lost, I am sad that my candidate didn't win, but rather, this is why I am freaked out. I want to give them that opportunity. And I want to give the Trump supporters the ability to respond to those concerns and accusations about why they voted for Donald Trump in the first place and what they think is going to happen and what they're worried about, if at all, or what they're hopeful about. It's a good chat that we're about to have about the election. I think you will find it emotionally fulfilling and rather cathartic right here on The Political Orphanage. I am joined today by Josh Jennings and Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy. Both are good friends of mine and regulars on the program. For anybody that's listened, you've heard both of them. You might have heard them talking together, as we have had a couple of these types of discussions previously on the program. Jennings and Andrea have come on The Political Orphanage to talk about their perspectives on abortion and on guns previously. And the response generally from listeners was, this is amazing. These people seem to be having a cogent conversation without wanting to attack each other with knives or rakes. And I keep wanting to see if I can push them to that point where they'll finally fight. And we'll see today. We might do.
We will get there eventually.
We'll get there eventually. The voice that you just heard is that of Josh Jennings. Jennings is the producer emeritus of this program, and at present means it sounds like you're on the chopping block. I don't mean that. Since leaving as my producer, or rather since I left, Jennings is a writer at The Blaze, which is a conservative media network. Josh, good to see you. Jennings, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I think that might be the first time I've called you Josh in 8 years. I know,
it's
Jennings.
Deeply uncomfortable.
It felt very weird. It was like saying your name naked with no clothes. I did not like it. Jennings, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And we are also joined by Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy. Andrea Jones-Rooy is a part of the Alliance on the World's Smartest Podcast Network that regularly joins this program. They are a data scientist and a political scientist and the host of Behind the Data. Hello, Doctor.
Hello. I'm tempted to call you Andy and Joshy, but I'll refrain from doing so.
You can call me Andy. I prefer Heaton, but
right.
I just moved to the D.C. area, and weirdly, I am known as Andy Heaton in the D.C. environ, because when I worked for the House, there was already an Andrew, and me, being a team player, I was willing to subjugate my entire identity for the team. So I just went by Andy. So any old Hill staffers know me as Andy Heaton, so I give you permission. You can call me that.
Done. I didn't know you moved back to D.C. I know that's the main reason we're here to talk, but congrats.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, I came in a couple weeks ago. I picked a really, really, really weird time to do this. Also just a very bad time logistically, because I came here and then immediately had to fly back to Austin for a live show, and then came back to record stuff for Reason, and then immediately flew to Atlanta for a horribly timed conference, and am now back and have caught my breath, drank my tea and all that kind of stuff. But we're on the East Coast. Andrea, we're in the same time zone.
Thank goodness.
And you should start inviting me to cool cocktail parties and things, because I'm a mere train ride away.
I love that you think I go to cool cocktail parties, but you're welcome to come drink seltzer and watch TV in the darkness with me anytime you want, as is the New York City lifestyle popularized by Carrie Bradshaw.
Okay, that will probably be the episode show title is Seltzer in the Darkness. I think that's a good a good way to begin this. So I mentioned this in the introduction. I'm not a Trump guy. I'm not pleased with the outcome of this election, but I do think that my emotional state's very different this time than it was in 2016. 2016, I was frightened and kind of apoplectic. This time, I am disappointed. I'm frustrated, but emotionally, this is falling within the normal parameters for me of the two candidates I don't particularly like. The one I dislike more won the election. So I am in a fairly centrist emotional state at the moment. I would like to check in with you both, given that I think we will probably be hearing a lot from Andrea, who is the aggrieved party in today's. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with Jennings. Jennings, how are you feeling about the election, and how did you vote, if I may ask?
You may ask. I'm feeling less terrible than I thought I would feel. I did not know for 100% certain, whom I was going to cast my vote for until the moment that I was standing over the ballot. And even then, I very, very reluctantly voted for Trump. It is difficult.
And you did it 3 times. So
yes,
I knew there was fraud. Yeah. I knew it. Yeah. Let's go. I'll see you on January 6th.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I would like it to be known on this podcast. I am, I think, the only person I know, at least who had made predictions or in my earshot. I think I'm the only person I know who predicted that the people on the left would not burn cities down this time.
That was the scuttle at the Blaze?
I guess they didn't burn cities down because of the election, but they wouldn't have huge riots and cause a lot of damage. I predicted that they would not, because they would be exhausted from this and more sad than angry. And I say that sympathetically, by the way, not with Schadenfreude, but anyway.
Suspicious amount of German you just brought up there.
There's a lot of German. If I may approach the bench, Justice Heaton, or Your Honor Heaton, I would like
Lord
to
Uncle
flag...
Heaton is the preferred title when we're going formal here.
What's the title?
Lord Uncle Heaton is my preferred title for going formal.
I would like to asterisk and return to Jennings' comment about this time. even though presumably I agree he's not referring to elections, but I would like to know other city burning, but we can go back to that.
Sure.
But I appreciate that you didn't think we'd do it, and we haven't.
I did not. And by the way, I'm mostly referring to the George Floyd riots. And I realized they didn't burn any cities to the ground. I was being slightly hyperbolic, but there's a lot of damage. Anyway.
But at least to triangulate your position, Jennings, you voted for Trump. You did so reluctantly. So you are pleased with the outcome of the election insofar as the outcome was going to be Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. But you're not in the multiple red hats, yay, Donald Trump is the savior of America side of MAGA. You're in the hold my nose side of MAGA?
Pretty much. In fact, I think the way that you phrased it at the beginning is I didn't like either candidates, and the one that I liked the less, or the one I liked least, I can't speak, sorry. For me, it's the other way around. The one that I liked the least didn't win, but I dislike them both profoundly. Yeah. So I'm not elated, other than ironically, that's fun. But in all reality, I'm not super happy about it. But I'm not. I guess I'll say I'm slightly less bummed than I would have been had Kamala gotten elected.
Okay. All right.
And that's where I'm at.
Good. I just kind of want to establish the parameters for listeners at home to know what we're working with here today. Andrea, the bench recognizes you. How did you vote? How are you feeling?
I'll never say. Here's how I'm feeling: is I've been crushing glass jars with my bare hands ever since we started recording. I voted with zero hesitation for the Harris-Walz ticket. And happy to talk through my reasoning for that, of course. Jennings, I do want to acknowledge that over here on the left, we have all been under the assumption that there was no such thing as an undecided voter, and particularly in the last few days leading up to the election, it just seemed unthinkable. And so I can't believe this whole time I've known someone who was actually making a decision at the ballot box. In fact,
Jennings called me 1 or 2 hours before he went to the ballot box and just very unironically went, "Here's your chance. If you want to talk me out of this, go for it." And I made my pitch for why I wanted Jennings to vote third party and failed. but I will say he was open to hearing arguments. And we had many discussions leading up to this, and was, if not on the fence, was malleable.
I appreciate that, and we're going to keep talking about Jennings without letting him chime in. But Jennings, you weren't malleable enough to call me.
I love being talked about. Oh, no.
Although I'm bad at picking up the phone, so I do care about democracy, but not enough to answer the phone when I'm, not in the mood to talk. Jennings is gone. We did
it. He just dropped out.
He just dropped.
Well, that was it. Jennings was a lot thinner skinned than I thought he was going to be.
Wow.
One would assume that Jennings would be more gracious in his...
I tell you what, Heaton, the snowflakes on the right just can't take it.
I know.
Trying to get back in. We'll see.
Jennings has just messaged me. He's going to get back in here in a second. Eric, feel free to keep that in because I think it's funny.
Hi, Eric. How are you?
And then there's Wallace in the background you can see.
I saw Wallace. Hi, Wallace. My dog is somewhere.
So while Jennings is rejoining us, Andrea, I bought a cowboy hat right before I left Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had friends go, "Can you pull off a cowboy hat?" And I went, "In the D.C. area? Yeah. In the Texas-Oklahoma area,
right.
No.
Right.
You did not meet Kate, my ex, but she's English, and she joined my family for Thanksgiving when we were dating, and she came in and went, "Isn't it amazing? I've always been interested with cowboys, and now I'm dating one." And my actual farmer rancher family went, "Andy?" It was very Midwestern barbed comments the rest of the Thanksgiving where they'd go, "Kate, in Edinburgh, would Andy be considered masculine?" So it was that kind of stuff the rest of the time. Anyway, I bought a cowboy hat for here in D.C., and I'm finding it to be really useful because when I walk down the street in a cowboy hat, people either are excited and want to talk to me, or they give me this incredible side eye. They don't know if I'm going to shoot them or not. And I find it to be galvanizing very quickly to people that would probably not be able to handle my personality versus people that I can be instant friends with.
That's right. It's a good filter mechanism. You should experiment, if you haven't already, with when you're walking Wallace, because Wallace invites in people. And I assume the cowboy hat alienates. And so I'd be interested in the interaction.
Wallace, totally unrelated to me, wears a necktie when we go out. Regardless of my costumery, Wallace wears a necktie. And that invites a lot of comments. People want to talk to the dog with a necktie, so that works.
I like that you think he wears a necktie unrelated to you.
Let me rephrase this. What I am wearing is unreal. I do not match my costumes to my dog's necktie costumes.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
We are rejoined by Jennings. Jennings has taken a shot of bourbon to steel himself against to Andrea's comments and has rejoined us.
I got pre-offended before I even heard anything. I was like, nah, I'm out.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I have no idea what happened.
You're okay. Internet stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay,
it's the Russians trying to keep us from stitching the country together.
At
least, look, we agreed right out of the gates.
I think we were saying, Andrea, that you voted unhesitatingly for Kamala Harris.
That's right.
And we digressed on Jennings, but we returned to you now. So how are you feeling in the outcome of the election?
Sure. So I appreciate the chance to talk about it. And I will say that I have felt I feel extremely bad. And I have felt particularly bad today with like sweaty palms, like Eminem full on, just anticipating having to articulate out loud how bad I feel. Though I will say, Jennings, you and I had a long conversation by telephone on Thursday of last week, and that actually really did help me feel a lot better. And I've tried to convey that to some of my devastated friends on the left. So maybe we can revisit that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, Heaton, you were comparing this to 2016, and I have to say, I think I feel worse. It's hard to say because 2016 was extremely bad for me and for many of people in my circles. But it was such a shock just because we thought Clinton was...
it was a shoo-in. I thought I would be in bed by 8, the election having been settled in favor of Hillary Clinton.
I even had the nerve, and I assume all of this is my fault, I even had the nerve to turn to my boyfriend just as the returns were starting to come in that night in 2016 to say, you know what? Here's something naughty. I want to say, I didn't say naughty. I said, here's something kind of bad that I'm thinking. I hope it's a little bit close so that it's kind of exciting. And then Florida came in. I was like, oh no, too close. I'm not exciting. So it's been exciting ever since. I will say that about U.S. politics.
You got to give it that. You got to give it that. I, for one, would love to live in a country where politics is so boring when they ask you, when they go, what do you think of the president? It takes 1 second to remember the name of the president. That's the world I want to live in.
Yes.
We're nowhere near that world.
We're not near that world. This will make me relatable. I was at the podiatrist earlier. It turns out I broke my toe weeks ago. Yeah. And I have very colorful socks on because my mother sends me socks because I'm a coddled liberal who can't live an adult life. And the podiatrist commented on them and he said, oh, you're sort of like George Bush Sr. And I was like, go on. This is the kind of political reference I want.
In terms of your foot shape, I am lost. Please continue.
In terms of my socks, apparently he was known for wearing very colorful socks. And I said to him, I was like, gosh, I wish that was all we talked about with our presidents these days. And then he got very silent, which made me think he might be a closet conservative. And in New York City, you're not. Anyway, I feel bad. And I think I feel worse than in 2016 because in 2016, A, it was mostly shock. And B, I was able to tell, but it's hard to say with the benefit of hindsight, but I was able to tell myself, like, maybe he won't be as bad as I fear he will be. And maybe the guardrails of democracy will be in place and he won't be able to do that much damage. And this time I feel very similar to a much more profoundly sad version of how I felt in the 2004 election when Kerry ran against Bush Jr. And I thought we all agreed that, and it was delusional looking back because he had the highest approval ratings, post 9/11, all that kind of stuff. But I thought we all agreed that the 4 years under Bush Jr. were horrible, and therefore any change would be an improvement. And I remember walking out of the house the day after that election and thinking, gosh, I don't live in the country that I thought I lived in, or at least not in the reality that I thought. That we're not in the same reality. And this was in 2004 when we all were much more in the same reality, in my opinion. So this year, it feels more like a much worse version of how I felt in 2004 than how I felt in 2016. And I'm happy to go into more detail on sort of the various things I'm afraid of. But yeah, go ahead.
Before we jump into the fears, which I very much want to talk to. I would actually just like some advice from my position in talking to friends. I have lots of friends across the political spectrum. I'm now starting to get my WTF ? Comments from Scotland. So I'll need to start. I will resume my unpaid ambassador role. I have found, well, I should say, in my case, I do not think that there is any good reason for people to try to talk me into feeling sad or angrier than I am. I don't see any benefit to it. I don't think it will alter the content of the program. If it does, it probably won't make it better. I think me being in a reasonably emotionally neutral place is actually better for me to do this show. I think it actually gives me more credit with people that are in any particular camp because they're less likely to think I'm unhinged. And just in general, I don't think it's of benefit. I'm not saying anybody can snap their fingers and change their emotional state, but I don't think it's of benefit for anybody to egg themselves on into a worse emotional state. So,
right.
Listeners, if someone has a really good reason that you should talk me out of my kind of emotional neutrality here, I'm open to it, but I'm very doubtful that there will be a good one. On the flip side of the coin, I do want to be a little bit careful talking to people that are on the heartbroken end of this, in that I find that I oftentimes am the guy. I literally was this last weekend, the guy who goes, "No, you're all wrong. Life is great. Like, look at global poverty levels. There's never been so few poor people. It's amazing." I am just a congenital optimist, and some people, depending on their circumstances, react positively to that and go, "I guess it's not as bad as you thought." For a lot of other people, what they hear is, "My feelings are illegitimate and you're not taking my grievances seriously." So, Andrea, I'm curious, for people like me that are not happy but also are okay, should we be reaching out to our friends that are heartbroken and trying to make them feel better, or will that just make them feel worse? What do you think?
It's a good question, and it's a thoughtful one, and I appreciate your thinking about it. From my own perspective, you saying you don't feel so annihilated and horrible and you feel relatively neutral, if slightly disappointed, that gives me hope, because you know a lot about the US government and you know a lot more about things like policy than I do. And so I feel like if you think we'll be okay as far as democracy in the United States goes, that means a lot to me. And I give that a lot of weight as a person who cares about this country. As for other people, I mean, I think I am not quite... I'm basing this largely on a handful of messages with close friends and then a lot on Instagram, and people tend to project their strongest emotions on Instagram. And so I have a lot of people in my circles who are definitely much more emotionally wrecked than I am. I cried on like Wednesday and Thursday a little bit, and not much because I'm mostly dead inside, but I mustered it. It was because I was watching a happy video and I was like, people can be happy. Oh my God, the world. It was very sad. But I'm not as I'm more just dead and disappointed and confused and disoriented about the country, and very personally not looking forward to, if not downright dreading, things like Trump's getting sworn in and having to have him in my ears and face all the time, like that kind of stuff. I'm not as devastated emotionally, so I can't really say. I think you're right that there may be people who it's like, the worst thing to say to someone when they're upset is, "Don't be so upset," and calm down. But I think if you have trusted relationships with people who already in the context of a conversation, you share how you actually feel, it could be helpful. Like, hey, it's actually not that bad. And I hear you. One of the most unpopular things you can say in much of the left is, actually, things aren't that bad. And that's one of the many problems with the left. But there's a ton of research out there that shows that there's never been a better time to be alive for any group, most groups, I guess I'll say. I wouldn't go out onto the streets and yell, "We're fine, you'll be fine." But I think if you are in a conversation, I wouldn't try to hide that you feel okay. I think that can be comforting.
Good. Well, okay. I'm glad to hear that. Because I did 2 episodes in this program in the build up to the election that I did very explicitly to try to help people over the course of it. So I had when you're confronted, I anticipated a lot of people would be disappointed with the election. I actually did an exit poll for people on that listen to the Political Orphanage and how they voted on Patreon. It was fascinating, by the way. It is a much more ideologically diverse group of people than even I anticipated.
Good for you.
Like 2% of the people that listened to the show went for Jill Stein. Didn't anticipate that at all. 1% went for Cornel West. Did not anticipate that at all. The majority voted for the top 3, of course. But the breakdown
Who's the
between
third? What?
Well, given that a lot of libertarians listen to the show, about 40% voted for Chase Oliver. Although all of them, from what I can tell in the comments, said I am their explanation. There was a significant amount of I'm not in a swing state. I would have voted for X. So if we had the ability to do ranked choice voting, we actually would have seen a very different polls. But a lot of people voted for Chase Oliver. Then after that, it was like maybe a quarter of the people voted for Kamala Harris, and maybe like 19% voted for Trump outright. So either way, I was correct in assuming that there would be a decent chunk of people listening to the program that would be disappointed either way with the outcome of the election. I was correct in that regard. And so I wanted to put 2 episodes together in the build-up, either laugh or cry. So last week's was the laugh episode. I did a musical. In retrospect, that was horrible timing. In my mind, I was like, I'll cheer everybody up with a musical. And that worked for people that thought they were going to be bummed regardless. It didn't work for people that were apoplectic. The last thing they wanted to do was to try to have their spirits lifted by heat and making a musical. So that was, I should have done.
That does seem aggressive. Yeah.
It was me. It made sense in context in that I did it last time when there was a debate, and I got a lot of messages of like, I was so sad after the debate. Your musical really helped me feel better. That was where I was coming from. But in retrospect, I should have done that before the election. And then the make everybody feel better episode, the crying episode, I did a Garrison Keillor parody a fortnight ago, where it's very much, America's going to be okay. And so I've had positive responses from that. But forgive me, I digress on my end.
And he told a story about good Nazis.
Yeah, weirdly enough. Yeah.
No context needed. Let's move on.
Got it.
Andrea,
was it about you? Is it about you, Jennings?
Yeah, totally.
It's what I could have said is I've got a pretty good story about behavioral economists, but that wasn't going to do anything. So but it involved a Nazi, so I went with a Nazi.
Small footnote on all of this: ranked choice voting is good, but approval voting is better. Just to seed that for you.
Sure. Yeah. And should note that the ranked choice voting people got absolutely boot kicked in this election. The only jurisdiction that I'm aware of that approved ranked choice voting was Washington, D.C. I do think you will see as a result that candidates are more consensus-based in the overwhelmingly Democratic Council of Washington, D.C. I do think it will be to some extent beneficial, but no in every state. And it might even have been revoked in Alaska, which is heartbreaking. So there were lots of reasons to be bummed about the outcome of the election. Okay, so then how about this, Andrea? I'll back up. You in 2004, you said you woke up in a country that's different than you thought you went to sleep in, and I would like you to elaborate on that. What country did you think you went to sleep in last week? What country did you think you woke up in?
I thought I went to sleep in a country where, not go to sleep because things were looking bad and I turned off the TV and fell asleep in the fetal position in my clothes on top of the covers. So the night before that.
Passed out might be the right word. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like I was falling off a cliff. And I will answer your question, but on Tuesday, on Election Day, I actually worked at the polls, which I had never done before, and it really buoyed my spirits, and it was a really beautiful thing to see people participating in democracy, see people excited to vote, some for the first time, some had been voting for decades, it's just very cool, and also, I don't know my neighbors, and so I got to know them a little bit, and so that was nice. A lot of people from Georgia, the country, in my neighborhood, which obviously Trump's going to kick them out, so I don't have to think about it anymore, but, they're white, so it's hard to say. Okay. I thought I went to bed in a country that, while I disagree with a lot of how the left goes about talking about and even seeking to address some of their mission, I thought I went to bed in a country that fundamentally preferred what I consider to be decency, kindness, generosity, and a respect for democratic norms and institutions, and a hope for things like, I'm trying to not use leftist buzzwords here, a hope for things like, equality of opportunity for everybody, and an economy that works for everybody, and international cooperation, and freedom, and all of these things. I thought I went to bed in a country that cherished those things, given that I understood about 40% of Americans are MAGA, and not them understanding what that was, but I thought the other 60% was like, and if nothing else, we all agree Trump is a very bad man, and what he has done in this country has been very, very bad, both when he was in office and before and after. And I can talk about sort of the ways that he's been very bad, but I think he's been, never mind the institutions. I think he's been very bad for our culture, and I think he's contributed to tearing us apart. And I thought we all just agreed he was bad and that he was very dangerous and that we didn't want a new Hitler. And I'm saying these a little bit extreme on purpose because these are the sorts of thoughts that I've had. And then I woke up and said, oh no, I am not in a reality that agrees that the majority agrees, particularly with the popular vote, that really hurt. The majority agrees that Trump was a bad person for our country, and the kind of hate and deportation and stripping of freedoms that he stands for seems to not be a deal breaker for my fellow citizens. And I thought this country was moving generally towards a moderate left stance on a lot of social issues. And I think that we're not. And I the last thing I'll say on this is kind of what I've done since then is to say, well, there's two possibilities. One is the left has been, I'm in these echo chambers where I'm just here. All I can hear is that the other side is the most deadly, dangerous group of people I've ever heard of. And it turns out that's the majority of Americans. So either what makes perfect sense to me, all the talking points on the left, either I think a lot of people in my camp are now thinking, well, we need to say it louder. We need to fight harder. We need to scream more. And I think absolutely not. I think that what seems to me to be so obviously the decent, right, fair, just choice for this country, we are not articulating that at all. And so my kind of takeaway from the past 10 days is I need to think about how to better share what I care about with others. And part of the reason I'm excited to be here with you, and part of the reasons Jennings and I had a conversation last week, is I need to understand what's going on with the other side, because I know a lot of smart, thoughtful people who are also patriots and also care about freedom voted exactly opposite to me. And so I am just, this goes back to the kind of bewildered side of things.
Well, then one more question, and I'm going to let Jennings have a lot to respond with here in a moment. But I want to add one more thing to ask you on this, which is, why do you think people voted for Donald Trump? Because I can tell based on what you're saying why you didn't vote for Donald Trump. Why do you think that this group of people voted for him? What's your analysis?
That's a really good question, and I wish I had the foresight to jot some thoughts down before the election, because now I'm living in the kind of benefit of hindsight, where every single outlet's op-ed writer has, and everyone I've ever interacted with on Instagram has their own take about what it was that went wrong, and we all suddenly know it so clearly about all the things that the Harris. But my best understanding from this, where I sit here, is I'm mostly persuaded by the economic argument.
Yeah,
I
me
think
too.
that, I'm trained as a political scientist, and the research on the fundamentals says that if the economy is not going well, the incumbent party is in trouble. And I believe the economy was doing well, but a lot of people didn't. And I'm also a little bit disoriented about my own, our divided sense of what counts as a good economy and what doesn't, and who it's working for and who it's not. And so I have some learning to do there. But from the fundamentals perspective, the economy is not great for a lot of people. Inflation has been a serious problem. And I think that voting for your own personal well-being does trump a lot of it's a place of great privilege for me to sit around and think about choosing the morally right person if I can't pay my bills, right? So I think that's a big piece of it. I'm less persuaded by, as far as a leading, so I guess people voted for Trump because of the economy first and foremost. I think the second reason is, I don't have a strong basis for this, but I do think that there is some sexism and racism that needs to be carefully thought about. I don't know if it would have been enough to override the economic concerns, and I don't think it's something that's top of mind for people. But I've had some conversations, including with straight white men, because as a leftist, I have to identify people that way, where they say, look, if Trump had been up against a macho, arrogant, loud, confident man, white dude, we might have had a chance. And I don't know it. I think that would have made it closer. I don't know that would have done it. But I think so. Economic reasons. And I think fear about changing your way of life because of either immigration or the transgender issues or LGBT indoctrination. I say all those with some hesitation because I don't believe any of those things are real, are the kinds of existential problems that they're depicted, as I understand it, on the other side. But I believe people also voted for those sorts of reasons. And then I guess so economy, fear of changing your way of life, and then the third is probably, and this is colored a lot by what Jennings said to me last week, and maybe I'll let Jennings speak at some point, but we'll see.
We can do another episode where I respond.
Like the other side.
It'll be fine.
The last piece is I think the right doesn't like. This is my limited kindergarten understanding. I think the right doesn't like a big government, and Democrats typically have a big government. So you're voting against, expansion of the government and government programs. I think the Trump side is. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Jennings, respond.
Okay. I just want to start with what you listed there, and I don't speak for the right in the sense that I consider myself in the middle, and I don't always agree with the right. On a lot of things, but I will attempt to speak for them because most of the people who voted for Donald Trump are not me. Most of the people I suspect who voted for Donald Trump were voting for him and not against Kamala Harris. Which, by the way, that sounds way more adversarial when I say it than I mean it to sound.
I think that's meaningful for the record. Like, this would be too much effort to bother putting it in terms of ballot reform, but just as an intellectual exercise, I would kind of like it if you had two options for every candidate: Donald Trump in all caps or Donald Trump lowercase.
Right.
Your vote goes the exact same way. All you're doing is signaling whether you're excited or you're reluctant. Same with all the other candidates. I would be curious to see, because back in 2016, that was the first election that we have on record where the effective polarization was high enough that the majority of people were voting against someone rather than in favor of them.
That's right.
So my guess is that with Trump voters, probably it's similar, where there's a lot who clearly liked him. He is very clearly popular, but there's a significant amount of people that went, look, I don't like the guy, but this is my preference between the two.
Yeah, agreed. Anyway, I'll try to speak a little bit for the right on this. The economy, I think, is absolutely true. That's the biggest reason. Incumbents always have difficulties if they have a bad economy. I think that's a huge part of it. Also, I would add to that, every president lies about the economy. So if it's doing sort of well, it's doing great. We're the gangbusters. Biden came out, lied about the economy all the time. And even if he was partially right, he was still trying to, because you're always selling it. You're always selling the economy because it's such a big deal. So when Biden lies about it, it's a big deal because people are actually feeling inflation. Some of that may be Trump's fault. Some of that might be Obama's fault. Some of that might be I don't understand economics particularly well, but I do have the sense that, like, this is like a wave in the ocean, and it is like every wave is connected to every other wave in some sort of way. So when he's lying about it, it matters because he's the incumbent. When Trump was saying that the economy was booming, and he was also lying, by the way, because they all do. But it didn't matter as much, I think, because the economy wasn't the biggest problem that his opposition had with him. And I actually think that like redounded to his benefit in this election from the previous election, or for the previous two elections, really, in a sense. So I think, but I think overall you're right about that. I think every president takes whatever the economy is and magnifies it to, well, we're doing amazing. So that's a big one. I disagree about the right. Well, let me say this. I'm sure there is a contingent of the right. I've met some of them in my life. Not very many have I met, but I've met a few that I think the racism and sexism moniker would apply to, or monikers would apply to. I don't think that's most of them, but I could be wrong, and I'm willing to be wrong. Or I'm willing to admit it if I see the evidence of it. I don't personally know a single conservative person who would have a problem with a woman president or a black president or a Hispanic president. I don't. I do know people who would not be okay with a gay president. I'll grant you that. And I'm related to people who would not be okay with a gay president.
Is it you? Just say it. Is it you?
No, it's I would be fine with a gay president. I'm fine with just about anybody.
Except who? Let's hear it.
Oh, well, I mean,
Laplanders.
Yeah,
those
yes.
with their sweaters.
Yes. The
If I could interject for a moment, Jennings, something
Sure.
that I think is relevant to any breakdown election or any breakdown of an election is there are multiple factors, and the one to consider primarily is what is the major causal factor in this. So, I don't disagree with either of you. There are sexists, there are racists in the electorate, but I don't think it was definitive.
Right.
So the only real argument that I've gotten into post-election. I was at a kind of dinner party where no one voted for Trump, by the way, but we were arguing about whether or not the primary thing was economic or whether MAGA is code for Make America White Again. And I was like, I really don't think that it's Make America White Again. I really think it's economic. And worse, I think that saying Make America White Again, where you basically tell all the people that voted for Trump, deep down, you're a bigot and I can see through your lies. And maybe you're even lying to yourself, but you're a bigot. I'm like, this is the worst electoral strategy imaginable.
Yes.
On the Democratic side, don't lean into that. You're making it worse.
It's a terrible electoral strategy, but it's also, again, and I'm willing to be wrong, but I don't think it's true. I mean, of course, there are those people. I don't think they make up the majority of the, let's say, the conservative side of the electorate. I don't see that. And I'm around a lot of conservatives. I'm plugged into conservative circles pretty heavily. And maybe I'm just seeing the cream of the crop. What I would really like is if we could come back a year from now and do this again and see where we're at and just like, hey, let's take the temperature again. And to your credit, both of you are some of the few people I would trust to give honest answers about that, even if you have to come back and say, well, I was wrong about this, as would I.
Hey, Jennings, I'm with you on I don't think that bigotry accounts for why Donald Trump was elected, but I should say on my end that all of the studies that I've read indicate that people are subconsciously influenced by various factors that, like generally speaking, we end up voting for the taller candidate. John Kerry is an exception to this, but by and large, guys that are 6 feet tall beat guys who aren't. There's no logical reason for it. Once we switched over to television, fat candidates did worse, right? So I could see there being subconscious bias there. Again, I don't think it would be enough to overcome the economic hurdle. I don't think it's the actual primary factor, but I could see it being in the mix.
Oh, yeah, I would agree with that.
The things that people tend to look for, and we can not go too far down this, but Heaton, I appreciate you say that. It really is, and one of the things that's tricky about this is very few people will say, I won't vote for her because she's a woman, right? Instead, we see things in various interviews and surveys say, well, not trustworthy, well, not tough enough against our foreign adversaries. And you're like, those are code words for many of us, or it's really more the problem is that we'll never know the counterfactual. And so while I agree that a tall, thin, white, outspoken man would have done better against Trump, we'll never know if that person would have won, because the economy probably was big enough to make that the difference. I think it would have been closer, but you never know, right? And so there's just no way to. It's an unanswerable question in many ways,
true.
Which is part of why it's so sinister. And when we talk about it in the workplace,
that being said, though, I think we can kind of play around with it in thought experience. Let's say that Biden hadn't dropped out. Biden's at the top of the ticket. Kamala's in the running mate spot. Trump had retired or something, and the candidates that the Republicans chose were Sarah Palin and I'm trying to think of like a very conservative black candidate, like because Ben Carson has always struck me as on Benadryl. He's not really electric, but let's just say that. Let's just say it's Sarah Palin and Ben Carson. I think the MAGA faithful still would have been real fired up. I think that the populist element was much stronger than any racial or gender alignments. So but again, you're right. There's no way to do it. There's no way to actually test this. But
and one thing I'll just say before I let Jennings talk again is on the left, and Heaton, your anecdote about the argument that you got into. One big problem with the left is that if you say, I think sexism, racism may have played a role, but probably wasn't the deciding factor. Even if this sound clip gets out, I'll be canceled. Like you can't
really.
Maybe but they're
that angry to that perspective of like you just have to accept that it was all bigotry.
In many parts of the left, if you say, well, I actually don't think that was a major factor or the major factor, you would be considered a racist yourself. And that's a problem on our side for us to deal with.
What a beautiful group of people to live among and be a part of.
Dinner parties. Let us discuss. This is why I'm drinking seltzer in the dark, Heaton. You understand that,
Seltzer
right?
in the dark. Seltzer in the dark. I have thoughts on this, but Jennings, I want you to continue yours and finish yours. So please go on.
By the way, this is great. This makes me hone my conversational or my interview skills because I get these short little jabs with which to make my point. So I have to I got to be faster. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So the economy, yes. Racism and sexism on a very, very, very low level, I think, might have moved the needle slightly, but I don't think it had much to do with the actual outcome. And I also want to broaden that out. I don't think most people are racist and sexist. I don't think that most people are that way on either side. And by the way, I'd like you to know there's a lot of people on the conservative side who think that the left are sexists and bigots and give a spate of reasons. And I do think there's a contingent of that on the left as well. It looks slightly different, but it's the same kind of disgusting animal that pops up out of us from time to time. I don't think it's big on either side. I think it is a slowly
this is where
diminishing...
I, as the emotional centrist, comes in and goes, I think most people in the country are pretty good. I think most of the country's not racist or sexist, and the bigoted elements are a minority.
By the way, no, go ahead.
I would just to say, I think deep down, all of us are a bit racist and sexist, but we can come back to that another time.
No. I actually thoroughly agree, and I would even take it a step further. I don't, and this is the most dangerous thing I'll say today. I'm not sure that there isn't any utility to the tiniest bit of it in the facilitation of society, let me qualify.
Listeners, I wish you could see me and Andrea right now. We have thoughts.
What I mean is, what I mean is that we have people can joke with each other. People can have a little bit of a sense of humor. It's part of what lightens the mood. You can take it too far very, very easily. I completely understand that. I myself have been guilty of taking it too far at times, not intentionally, but it's happened. I've offended people in the past when I've made a joke, and I had to apologize to them and say, well, I didn't mean anything by it. My apologies. But there has to be the tiniest bit of grist in the mill. And I don't just mean race and sex. I mean everything that can be offensive. Like we're so concerned in this country, and rightly so after our history, about things that give offense, that we sometimes take it too far in that we don't realize, well, the capacity to offend is desperately important. You have to have the capacity to offend, otherwise you're not having real conversations with each other. You're not being honest. Okay? So I guess that's what I'm saying is, like, there is that capacity, and some of that I think is necessary, but you do have to keep a really tight lid on it, because, like, if you allow it to go too far, it becomes a problem, certainly.
Jennings, I want you spoke a moment ago about why you think conservatives voted for Donald Trump, or why Trump voters did it. I would like to hear why you specifically voted for Donald Trump.
Okay, all right, and I'll qualify that I voted against the Harris-Walz campaign
because of sexism and racism. I think we can all agree that yes, 100%,
especially after everything I just said.
Yeah,
you can write me off.
I will. Yep.
Yeah.
Done.
So okay, all right. This is I want you to know I wrote 6 pages of notes on this in preparation for this, and I'm not going to read all of them, but I do want to, if I may, read a little bit of them.
Sure. Okay.
Because I have ADHD like crazy. I am a writer by nature, and this is how I collect my thoughts. So
go for it.
What I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna give you my biggest disqualifier for Trump, and then the disqualifiers for Harris.
Okay.
And I would like to just note before that, almost anybody could have come along and won my vote away from Trump. Democrat, Republican, not so much third party. We'll get into that why that later, because Heaton and I I broadly agree with Heaton on third-party candidates, and this might just be more of an emotional knee-jerk reaction to me, but I'm really tired of losing every single time going into an election. So maybe
we got 1.3%. I mean, we're doing. If you look at the arc of the
we're
third party,
almost there.
If we keep up the momentum we've had by 2148, we
by the
should
time
be able to
Vulcans
get about
land,
a quarter of the electorate.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, noting that almost anybody could have come along and won my vote away from Trump. The biggest Trump disqualifier for me is the election. Everything surrounding it, from his inaction concerning the January 6th riots, to his team's alleged use of fake electors, to his request of Mike Pence to not certify the election. That is all, like, to me, when that happened, I said I will never vote for that man again, and meant it. And as far as I was concerned, he could have been thrown out of office the next day. He was out a couple of weeks later, so it didn't really matter. But like, on a principle, that's what I would have said. Everything else that Donald Trump did that I didn't like, and there were tons of things that I didn't like in his first term, was not necessarily a barrier, because there's a lot of stuff that I don't think is. Here's the second most dangerous thing I'll say today. I don't think Trump is a bigot, because I don't think Trump thinks about anybody but Trump. I don't actually think he's a bigot. I don't think
he's a fascist, because isms require reading, and I don't think he's read anything that doesn't contain nipples in about 25 years.
He's not Hitler, because he's not smart enough to be Hitler. Anyway, doesn't mean he couldn't be a dictator. Anyway,
I agree with you on your 3 points in ascending order, but go on.
Oh, I like ascending order.
Yeah.
Smart grip here. Keep going.
Okay. So anyway, those things are terrible. That is the one disqualifier, and it like I said, I walked up to the ballot and was still not certain whether or not I was going to vote for him. Now let's talk about Biden-Harris to Harris-Walz. Okay. The moment that I thought Trump should have been thrown out of office was January 6th. The moment I thought that Biden should have been thrown out of office was Afghanistan. And not just a moment, but multiple moments. And I won't even go into like all of it, but right now there are 20 million women in Afghanistan who, for the last 20 years, were not required to be part of abject sex slavery. They did not have to walk around covered head to toe in hijab. And now they do. And I think that that's horrific. I am not sure what the answer was. I know it was not what we did. And what we did was we cowed to the Taliban, a bunch of, I don't know, 12th century barbarians, I think someone calls them, that we didn't have to. We left them billions of dollars of military equipment to continue terror, because they are a terrorist organization. That for me was the first time that I said, oh, he should not be in office either, for sure. So that's a big one. Another one was COVID, and of course, I don't think Trump handled COVID particularly well either. This is this is such a deep dive, and I don't want to go in too far, but it's important to note that Trump could just as easily have screwed COVID up, and had started to screw it up. And the blame on this one is somewhat diffuse, but my biggest problem with the COVID thing is I don't feel like we learned anything, and I don't feel like our president led us in any direction at all. It's not even that he necessarily led us down the worst possible path. I don't think that happened. But he was the leader, and he did nothing. And unfortunately, other people tied to this ticket did do some things. And that leads me to the biggest thing. I could not have voted for Harris, not because of Harris, but because of Tim Walz. When I watched the vice presidential debate with Tim Walz and J.D. Vance.
Wait, the one where they were coherent, reasonably civil, and
Yes.
American democracy appeared to
I think I
function for one
texted you and
glittering
I
moment?
said, can we drop the two main candidates and just
I would
have
have
these guys?
I would have loved to have flipped. I would have felt far better if we flipped the ticket. I usually do, but like,
I would
anyway,
too.
yeah.
And I thought to myself, I could sit down with Tim Walz and have a beer. I could have a conversation with this man. He seems very intelligent and very likable. Not incapable of saying, "Hey, I made a mistake." Which, by the way, that's a huge thing with me in politicians. There's so few politicians who will just say, "I screwed up. I changed my mind because I found out I was wrong."
Agreed.
And I liked that. And then I found out about how he governed his state during COVID, and I was like, "Oh, so like the Stasi in East Berlin, you had a phone line set up for people to rat other people out because they weren't following the masking ordinances correctly." Sorry, at that point, like, that is dictator behavior. That's bringing receipts to the table. And again, I like the guy. I think in terms of personality, he seems very reasonable to me. And again, if he could come out and say, "You know what? I made a huge mistake with the way that I governed my state." Okay, I'm willing to forgive that. I'm willing to. I mean, it's a big job, and if Kamala Harris were to, if something were to happen to her, God forbid, he would be the president of the United States. That may be the biggest reason why I voted for Donald Trump, is that I don't want someone who has acted dictatorially in their powerful capacity to have that power. Now, that being said, obviously Donald Trump is not exactly the shining beacon of on the hill of acting in a good way with his power. I don't particularly love the argument from the right that goes, "Well, yeah, he said that the election was stolen from him, but then he did leave office." Yes, he did. He also tried not to.
Yeah.
If I had proof, and I don't think, I suspect we'll never know for sure, and that frustrates me. If I felt there were solid proof that he had committed electoral fraud, legitimately committed it, not just because you get both sides of this are very, very strident in saying, "Well, no, he didn't commit a crime. He didn't handle it particularly well, but he didn't commit a crime." Or, "Yes, he absolutely did." If I knew which one of those sides to trust, I might have voted differently. The last thing that I thought about as my hand lowered to the ballot was, can I swear on this episode, by the way?
I think you should.
We would all welcome it.
The last thing that I thought was like, well, I don't fucking know, so I'm just going to go with my gut. And that is ultimately what I chose to do. I will be willing to come back in a year and say, I messed up. I shouldn't have done that. If that's what happens. I will say, and this is a long shot, I don't know if this will happen. If he gets into office and he ends two wars that both of which stand a chance of dragging us into a third world war, excuse me, if he does that, I'm probably going to be willing to forgive the January 6th thing, or not forgive it, but set it aside and say it was worth it. I am disconcerted by everything that I've seen coming from the Biden-Harris administration concerning war. And there's a good argument that I've heard made. Well, Kamala was the vice president, not the president. She does not have the plenary power that the president has. I agree with that. Kamala could have won my vote by going on The View or whichever places. There were several places she said this, but The View was the most notable.
Highly credulous soundbite media.
It doesn't matter who asks the question. It could have been some bystanders could have asked her, "Hey, what would you do differently than the Biden administration?" And if she had given any answer other than, I can't think of anything, she might have won my vote. And I sincerely mean that. It's possible. But she didn't. She said on multiple occasions that she didn't. People would ask her, what's the difference between you and Biden? And her answer was, well, I'm a woman and he's a man, so we're obviously different. I'm sorry. That's not an answer. That's not an answer. And I do understand she was in a very tough position. I mean, they had just, she got 3 months after the Democratic Party pulled a fairly unconstitutional coup, or at least is it just against the Democratic Party rules? It's not unconstitutional.
There was no legal issue because it was all internal party.
Just immoral and unethical.
I would say it confounds slightly the claim that they are the party of democracy. However, it was also a sui generis situation. So I didn't like it either. I kind of get how it went that way. Yeah.
So yeah, fair enough. Whatever. I understand she had a difficult road to hoe with that because it's hard to come out against the president that you're currently serving under and say, well, I'm going to do things differently than he did. I get that that's tough, but that's kind of the cost of doing business. And you got to give the American people something, and I didn't feel like she did. And so if you're the last person walking out of the room, as she claims to be, on Afghanistan, and you do nothing whatsoever to distance yourself. In fact, I believe she said, and this one I may be wrong on, so please fact check me, but I believe she said she wouldn't specifically have done anything different in Afghanistan. I'm sorry, at that point, you've lost my vote, because at that point, to me, Afghanistan was every bit as, let's say, every bit as bad. Perhaps not every bit as criminal, I don't know, but every bit as bad as anything that Donald Trump did with concerning January 6th or anything like that. It was immoral. It was horrific. I am astonished that the left just whistled past that graveyard, and it's a pretty goddamn big graveyard at this point. And it's only going to get bigger. So as much as I loathe Donald Trump, and I do, and as much as over the next 4 years, every time he steps out of line, I will be the person yelling the loudest, I didn't feel like, I don't want to say I didn't have a choice, because I could have voted for third party. And I have voted third party in the past. And this is probably where all of my credibility is going to go out the window. What credibility I came to the table with to begin with, this is where it will go out the window. I am emotionally compromised by all of the things that I just told you about. During COVID, my sister and my father came close to death. Donald Trump is for right to try, which is, for those who don't know, it's the right to try medications that are outside of the normal. And in the case of COVID, it was things like hydroxychloroquine or the monoclonal antibodies. And as far as that went, because my family refused to take the vaccine, the thing that saved their lives was monoclonal antibodies. I believe, it seems like, possibly they were, sick near unto death, and the next day they were feeling much better because it ran its course, but I have a hard time believing that. So I'm very emotionally compromised by that. I'm emotionally compromised by Afghanistan because the people who were bringing the American citizens and people who needed to be rescued out of Afghanistan was not our government, even though that was their job. Our government took the military out first and left everybody fucked. The people who were taking them out is the people I work for. My boss, Glenn Beck, has a charity organization that raised, I think, $20 million over the course of like a week. And we flew planes, not we, meaning me. I wasn't one of them. I don't want to steal any valor here, but there were people, very brave people, not working for the government, working privately, who flew in planes in and saved those people. And they didn't get them all. And some of the people who died were specifically people that we were trying to get out of the country at the time when they died. So I'm very emotionally compromised by that. I'm emotionally compromised by Israel. I have the Israel-Gaza situation to the point that I don't voice my opinion on that very often because I know I'm emotionally compromised. I was privileged, if you want to call it this, to sit in on a viewing from the Israeli embassy in our region of the unedited footage from October 7th. So I've now seen 2.5 people be beheaded, and I say that exactly the way that I mean it, among lots of other horrific, awful things. So I'm emotionally compromised on that. I don't think that Biden has done a good job of being involved in that situation to end that war. I don't think he's done as terrible of a job as I thought he was going to. Give him that.
Jennings, I appreciate everything you've said. I feel there's been enough of a chunk that we've now done.
Yeah. And, sorry. I'm windy.
Andrea is clearly about to get kidney stones from suppressing whatever she's been thinking the last 20 minutes.
So much for my poker face.
You did an admirable job, Andrea. I could see you noting that we all very much respect Jennings' feelings on that, and that all of the situations that you mentioned, people dying from COVID, Afghanistan, and Israel, that all of those are horrific and very legitimate things to be emotionally compromised or worked up about. Noting all of that, we've got a lot to work with in terms of where we want to come from. So, Andrea, when you hear a Trump voter saying all this, you can start wherever you want. You can start at the beginning, the middle, or kind of what is your reaction? What do you make of it?
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And I have 3 reactions that I to share. And I want to say, and this is the first one, and this is going to sound patronizing, but I mean it sincerely, is Jennings, it's very heartening to me to hear how much care and thought and analysis, and it sounds like self-reflection, you put into deciding how to cast your vote. And I wish,
Thank you.
I found myself thinking, Heaton, the tribalism is dumb, and I really I wish more, if not all of us, voted the way that you did, with the kind of care and thoughtfulness. And even though I don't agree with where you landed, I admire the way you went to it, and the way you approached it, and I really do think we can all learn from that. The second thing I will say is, and I guess sort of asterisk on that is recognizing when we are emotionally compromised is also something that I certainly don't do enough of. And so I appreciate the way that you've brought that into the conversation, because I certainly have those on my side, and it's not something that I'm always so clear about being able to tease out. The second thing I will say is that a lot of what you described is very interesting to me, because Heaton, I was struck when you first asked me, why do I think people voted for Trump? Because the language on in the ecosystems that I'm in, the information ecosystems and the conversations I've been a part of, it's really much more about why didn't Kamala win, as opposed to why would someone vote for Trump. And I think at least many of us on the left thought it was very much our election to lose, and that it was, when Kamala was, and I'll say this word, knowing that you raised some thought-provoking points around how she came to be the nominee, but kind of when she was crowned as the nominee, which is a very deliberately non-democratic term, there was a lot of enthusiasm on our side. We were very, very worried about Biden and all of that stuff. But one of the biggest headlines coming out, I don't think this is why people voted. This didn't come up when I was describing why I thought people voted for Trump, but a reason that I think Kamala did not have a stronger campaign is exactly, Jennings, what you described, is she was not able to distance herself from the Biden administration. There were a lot of things that the Biden administration has done, is doing, that I also am not particularly pleased about, and in fact am against. I don't know that he's the kind of danger that I've heard Trump describe him, but I do think that it was a lot that was not good. And I don't know what behind the scene mechanics were going on that Kamala couldn't say, A, I had no say over that, or B, I totally disagree and I would do differently. And I really would appreciate had she been able to, or had she been willing to, or whatever was going on that prevented her from doing that. Or maybe she just did believe the same, and I think that was not a good belief.
I think she operated as a quantum candidate, but I'll just put in a quick pin, Andrea. Yeah. The reason that I phrased that is, why do you think people voted for Trump? Partly because he won.
It's a good question.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
But the other reason for that is that I think this was the Trump or not Trump election, and I base that largely off of my Democratic friends. Where on this program, it was really enlightening, by the way. I did a Pitch Me on Trump and Pitch Me on Kamala episode where I brought on people, and I only bring people on the program that I think are going to be intelligent, that are going to make a good case for whatever their thing is. I never bring anybody on the program to make them look bad. And
except me.
With the exception of Jennings. Jeremiah Johnson and Jeff Maurer, both friends of mine, who I thought did a wonderful job of articulating why Trump's policies were bad, and I was swayed by them. They didn't make a compelling case of why Kamala was good. They made a compelling case in my mind that the non-Trump alternative was good, but there wasn't a proactive case on her end. And then the other thing I'll add is just I have yet to meet anybody that was a Kamala fan prior to Biden stepping down from the election. Lots of people voted for Biden and Kamala, obviously, but I knew Elizabeth Warren fans, I knew Hillary fans, I knew Biden fans. I didn't, and then she took it. Then everybody loved her, and I went, this just seems somewhat artificial to me. So my interpretation is this was the Trump versus not Trump election, and Trump won, which is why I phrased it that way.
No, it's a good way to phrase it, and it also is important. I think it's been a helpful phrasing for me personally because I spent a lot of time thinking about what did we do wrong. Speaking of tribalism, and that's the kind of bewilderness I was speaking of earlier, which is like Trump just seems so obviously bad that I would have voted for a brick. Like I actually think that might be the way forward for this country, and I would like to pitch that for the next election.
Bricks are also orange, though.
Yeah.
They're more of a rust.
What if the evil comes from the color?
It could be. He says wearing the color, but
yeah, it's true. Unintentionally, I wore an orange shirt today. I was not thinking about it at all.
I also am wearing blue team colors, which I also didn't mean to do. But the third thought I wanted to say in my reaction, Jennings, to what you described is that I think you are absolutely right about Afghanistan. And it is atrocious what has been going on over there. I have some family in the government, and they've been a part of some of the rescue missions as well. And I think it's, the part that stands out to me, the way you phrased it, whistled past the grave, or the language that you used there is like a true writer. That was very good. I think what stands out to me most in that is not a talking point that I have encountered, at least during this election. Or this election cycle. And I think that it was a big part of the conversation early on. And I think you're absolutely right that the left has moved on. We have been talking a lot about Israel-Palestine. We have been talking less, but somewhat about Russia-Ukraine. Mostly the issue on the left has been Gaza. And, as far as us being concerned about the rights and livelihoods, and particularly the ability of women to lead lives with dignity and stay alive, it is notable the silence on the left on that front. And I will say that I think this taps into something else that is probably a whole other conversation, which is just, it's easy for the left to say, oh, misinformation on the right. I think much more often, and there's misinformation in both camps.
Sure. Yeah.
I think more often it's a difference in what is made salient. And I don't know how salient the war in Afghanistan or the withdrawal from Afghanistan has been in the talking points in the lead up to the election, but it is striking to me how little conversation there has even been on the left about it.
Talk about talking like a writer. It's what salient is. That, yes. I could not agree more.
I'm really glad that I did some push-ups and drank tea before today. I talked the bonus episode, which will accompany this. Eric, cue the Patreon music. The bonus episode, which will accompany this week, is with Justin Robert Young and former Representative Scott Klug. And we recorded that last night. I was hoarse because I had been belting out show tunes around a piano in Atlanta, Georgia, one day previously. And also my brain was just blitzed. You can hear my brain fall out of my ears like I'm Joe Biden on a debate stage at least twice during it. But fortunately, I've recouped and could keep up with you both. I will shift slightly into the future then. Clearly, Andrea, you think that Trump was a very bad choice. I agree with you for what it's worth. I am curious as to what you were afraid of. A lot of this, to me, this is where me as a guy that tribal. I'm not a tribalist. What would a person who studies tribalism be? Would I be a tribalologist? Tribalologist.
It sounds like you're like a treble, like a singer of something like
Yeah, I agree. I'm almost a tribalologist. As a tribalologist, it does seem to me that a lot of this ends up being abstract, where, can you imagine a Catholic sitting upon the throne of England? I cannot live in an England ruled by a Catholic. Now, I know that there are lots of actual things, this is going to affect me or people I love about things that are clear. I'm not saying that's everything. I see a lot of that, though. So I want to kind of drill down and go, what are you afraid of over the next 4 years? What are you worried about? And I would like to have a particular emphasis on, material, quantifiable, actionable things as opposed to vibes. They're important too, but they're less important to me, to be blunt.
Okay. Well, Jennings, the other day when you shared with me that you had 6 pages of notes, I thought, boy, I better get my act together. And in my ADHD version, that means not writing anything down, but getting 4 big things in my head. And so I have 4 things that I'm afraid of.
Okay.
And Heaton, they will go from, I believe, specific to vibes. I'll try to sort them in that order.
This is good. This is good.
Yeah. So they are institutional, cultural, what I'll call actual. I'll help. I welcome help with the wordsmithing, and existential. So I'll go quickly, and then maybe we can return to them if we want. But so the institutional are kind of January 6th et al. Basically is everything that I think January 6th was the worst, but I think there are plenty of other things that Trump did in the United States government that were very, very damaging and generally gave him more executive power, which as much as I believe that there should be more of a social welfare state, I do not believe the executive himself should have more power. Things like being able to continue to make an even more conservative Supreme Court makes me very nervous. Other various things that make him immune from committing crimes. I mean, the way that it's talked about on the left, he is all but completely free to just shoot his opponents and no one will stop him. I mean, these are the kinds of institutional fears. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but I really do think that the wheels are coming off of democracy, and he is eroding a lot of those rules and formal norms by which we have lived domestically and also internationally. So that's one.
I share that fear, by the way.
Okay.
I'll do my rejoinder. I'm not going to go point by point.
Okay.
I'll save my stuff for later. If I don't respond, everybody, it doesn't mean okay. Anyway, please continue, Andrea.
It means Heaton's not worried about democracy, but that's my headline. No, I mean, even
I got a handwritten note from Trump that said, "You're one of the good ones. You're not on the hit list. Don't worry."
Mine hasn't arrived in the mail yet.
Yeah, bad news on that, buddy.
I'm digging my silo as we speak, but Jennings, I appreciate both. My initial reaction when you said you're worried about that too was like, oh, good, and then I was like, oh, maybe that's bad that we're all that worried about it. But okay, so institutional fears.
Yeah, I just really quickly, I do think I've described when it was Biden versus Trump, I described it as a fast-acting poison versus a slow-acting poison, and I like that. I'm not even sure on the fast-acting poison part, but I definitely think Trump's a slow-acting poison.
How amazing, because I thought Biden was, when you gave that analogy, I thought Biden was the slow-acting poison and Trump was the fast-acting.
Jennings, you're the only person in America that's described Biden as fast-acting in the last
that's a really good
years.
Point. I'm gonna put my writer's sash. I'm gonna take it off now.
Okay,
that was not smart.
We'll let you know when you're allowed to bring it back. No, but I mean, the way that I imagine it in my head is like day one. Trump's like dictator on day one. He literally said something like that. I'm not quoting him directly, but something like that. It's like that's the fast-acting poison. Biden can barely string a sentence together. It turns out, and that's pretty slow and not great. But
right, but his underlings can cause all kinds of damage. Just ask Anthony Blinken. Sorry, go on. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I wanted to get a dig in.
No, I like it.
Go for it.
It's fine. I can take it. I mean, I don't like it, but I can handle it. Digging faster now to the underground. So that's institutional. The second one, and this is a little bit vibey, but it makes more sense to put it ahead of the third one, is cultural. I think that one of the things I have found surprising is when the Trump assassination attempt happened, my understanding of a lot of the discussion on the right was that this was the result of hateful language on the left, which I found upsetting and concerning because our country, for those reasons, but also hilarious because on the left, we are very convinced that the right is full of vitriolic and violent rhetoric and language and hate and much more tolerant of violence. You have all the guns. It's culturally, I think that Trump has has accelerated affective polarization, has accelerated the hate between the left and the right. And I worry about that continuing. I also worry, and I think the left is not doing a great job at describing our vision for culture. And I think culture war and cancel culture and all that stuff is the left being very, very clumsy. And obviously that's an oversimplification. But I think culturally, Trump embodies and is an example of being hateful and petty and is a bad role model for our children and is a bad role model for how to be a patriot. And so that concerns me. This brings me to concern, which can be very lasting. the damage. This brings me to concern 3, which is actual, which is I worry that people are going to die as a result of the Trump administration. And I'm referring to things like transphobic attacks only increasing. People who are transgender are already very, very disproportionately likely to be the victim of sexual violence and violence. They're not the only group, but that's one. The hatred for other members of the LGBTQ community, people getting deported who are maybe already on their path to citizenship, and generally less regulation of guns and all of that. I think if there's another pandemic, I guess Trump's going to get rid of the CDC, and the CDC is not perfect. It did a lot of things incorrectly from a policy perspective, but I don't think that we are equipped for a pandemic. And then reproductive rights. At least in my world, I'm hearing a lot of stories about, women who are 21 dying of sepsis because they couldn't get the care they needed in Texas while they're having a miscarriage, like that kind of thing. So I worry about actual deaths. And I think we can have a thoughtful conversation about whose deaths. And I think, I'm thinking Afghanistan, Gaza, et cetera, as I think about deaths. But from a perspective of American deaths and the deaths of people in this country, I fear for that. And then the last one is the existential, and the biggest vibes is that I think all of those 3 things put together make me genuinely worried about the future of this country in a way that I feel like I haven't felt since I've been alive. But I also want to put this in context and say every generation thinks that their generation is the one that's facing the worst thing ever. And so maybe I'm just being hyperbolic, but it feels existentially terrifying that we might be and we talked about this, Jennings, the other day, in a kind of Hitler interwar years, and this is him getting elected to power again. And that maybe is left hyperbole, but it's the genuine existential fear that this country will not be a democracy and will not be a place where all types of people can thrive, or will be a place where people can thrive even less than they already do. Feels like this isn't the America that I thought I was in, and I worry that it's only going to get worse. So that's very vibey at the end, and I apologize for that.
So if I can respond to some of that.
Please do.
All right. So
because I like all that stuff, so I'm going to wait till. I'm joking.
He
I'm joking.
is pro.
Yeah.
Killing
I'm pro
trans
all of that.
teens. Yeah.
I'm just for everybody. Jennings, please respond. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of what you're saying is stuff that I agree with. I do think that we are moving. Every generation does think that it's the worst generation. But
with the exception of truly, I'm actually very optimistic in general and think that my kids will have a much better life than me. And if I live long enough to see grandkids, their sex robots will be amazing.
Do you think that they will have a better political life? I agree with that too. But do you think that politics will be better by the time that your kids and grandkids are around? Okay.
Don't know.
So, but that's a good distinction to make too. I also think it is the best time in human history to be alive, with almost any marker. But within that, like, this is the world we live in, which is a great world. This is the country we live in, which is a great country. Here's our politics, and it sucks.
Which
it does seem to be
pessimistic
getting worse.
about. If we're just talking about politics, yes, I'm pessimistic.
Yes,
it's like for all the material well-being that we have, and many people don't have the things that they need. But I agree, materially, it's never been a better time to be alive, and we're somehow really finding a way to make each other miserable. It's like the siblings in a rich family who just can't let them enjoy.
We are Succession. That's our whole country.
I would like to be Ken. I don't want to be. I want to be Tom. Never mind.
I'm clearly the fop that runs for president. I know who I am. Yeah, the harmless guy that doesn't know what's what. Yeah.
I'll be Roman. I think I'm more capable than I am.
I don't actually know what you guys are talking about.
Jesus, the cultural divide lives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let me put it to you in NASCAR speak. So Jennings.
No, what are you referring to?
Oh, there's a show called Succession on HBO. It's sort of a
okay. You both
Rupert
have recommended
Murdoch type
this to me.
Guy. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. I need to catch up. My apologies. I've been writing books.
Well,
Sorry.
No. So Jennings, can I prompt you?
May I finish what I was going to say really quickly? Sorry,
please do.
I just don't want to lose the thread. Okay, so to those fears, I agree with the erosion of our political world and that it spills out way too much into our society. I don't know that I think Donald Trump is the only no, let me rephrase that. I definitely do not think Donald Trump is the only force that is doing that. I think that both sides, the media on both sides, although to be fair, the media on the left is considerably larger and has a much bigger outreach than the media on the right, but both sides, and I say this as a person who works in conservative media, I just write advertising, guys, don't kill me. But like the
NASCAR.
Yes, NASCAR. But the media landscape is horrific. The social media landscape is horrific. The political landscape is peopled with narcissistic morons who and I just think that Trump, yeah, Trump is just like, and I'm not trying to minimize the problem with Trump, but I do want to say Trump is just the loudest and one of the dumbest. I don't think, I mean, there's this monolithic quality.
A symptom, not a cause.
I was just going to say.
Yes, yeah. This cape of evil that we sort of drape over him, and a lot of it's earned.
Your writer sash is back. Continue.
Yeah, it's back. That was good.
Thank
Draping
you.
a cape of evil was very good.
That's good.
But let me tell you, and forgive me, you guys probably already know this, but for the listeners, let me talk about Hitler for just a second.
Go. You have
been waiting with the bated breath.
Okay.
So before World War II gets fully into swing, Hitler he's been in power for a number of years. He's just starting to take territories, and he always does the same thing where he's like, oh, we have to invade Czechoslovakia because, bullshit reason. And what he really wants is we're going to go in there and take the land and have Lebensraum. So he goes and he takes it, and everybody, England's like, tut tut now, you shouldn't be doing that. But, as long as you don't do it again, we'll let you be. And Hitler's like, I would never do it again. And then he immediately goes and takes Poland or whatever.
Hitler gonna Hitler.
Hitler gonna Hitler. So we haven't reached full World War II yet, and that's an important thing. So at this point, it's just him, and he's invading countries and he's taking them over. At that point, the people who woke up and realized, oh, we should not have put this guy into power at all, they realized, because there was a whole cabal of people all throughout the rest of the war who were trying to kill Hitler. They tried to kill him like a dozen times. There's some great books on this.
Were they all time travelers being sent back?
All right, sorry. They tried to kill Hitler 24 times. I wasn't even mentioning those people. They tried to kill him multiple times. And the thing is that it had to be, before they tried to kill him, they were trying to set up a coup. And the reason that they did not succeed is that at that point, and this is before World War II is even fully in swing. At that point, only the military would have been able to oust him. Okay, so the structure in Germany went from the Weimar Republic to Hitler being chancellor to Hitler being dictator in the space of a number of years. And by the time that he's there, the only thing you can do is get him out with the military. We are so very far away from that right now. That's
in terms of just parliamentary democracy functioning, in terms of a dictator stepping in.
We have not if Trump even tried to do that, it wouldn't work. He's not got enough. Even though he just got his kind of red wave, he does not have the kind of support in his country that Hitler had in his country by the time that he took over power. And there's lots of reasons for that. The Weimar Republic was a complete financial disaster that almost ruined everybody in Germany. They basically were hit harder by the Depression than probably anybody, or pretty close.
I'm gonna intervene here only because I know that Jennings is a middle-aged white man, and so he can talk about World War II
I will taper
indefinitely. So I'm gonna stick.
I've lit a cigar and I have on my smoking jacket. Let's go.
Here's what surprised me about both of your fears, Andrea, and Jennings' response. Although perhaps you were going to get to it after your 15 minutes on why
I was almost done.
I appreciate the the comparison. I see that we are. Yes,
and I think we all share that. That like my top two. I've got three things that I'm worried about with Trump. And my buckets are institutional norms, erosion of norms, erosion of autonomy, stuff. Same ballpark you guys are talking about. I would call them black swan events of things that I think are low probability but high impact if they were to occur.
Sure.
Those are what I'm worried about Trump. And then economics, which is the thing I'm surprised that you didn't bring up, Andrea. I am one of my biggest concerns with Trump is tariffs and economics. I think it's going to make inflation come back. I think it's going to hurt a lot of people. I don't think people, if he is successful in promulgating his economic worldview, I don't think people understand how beneficial trade has been. Jennings, I am surprised that you did not bring up, because you had told me this, the kind of polyglot ragtag group of people that Trump has assembled that made you feel better about the prospective tolerance within the Trump administration. I know you'd called me and said, he's bringing in Tulsi Gabbard, he's bringing in RFK. I as Jennings see one group of people that's bringing in lots of different minds from different ideological perspectives, and I see another one that's not doing that. So I'm kind of surprised that.
That's because that was my money shot. That now it's gone. Now it's gone. No, I was going to bring that up at some point, but yeah, no. I do think that there's some validity to that, in that there does seem to be a little bit of diversity in terms of, I mean, everybody on the left, as soon as somebody aligns with Trump, they immediately hate them, and we never liked Elon Musk. Elon Musk was the darling of the left until he sinned.
Jennings, we don't like to talk about that, just so you know.
I'm sure you don't.
I scowl at Teslas as they pass.
Yeah, right. But forgive me for saying this, but if you're being completely honest with yourself, you probably shouldn't. He's been a huge friend of the left, and he got he I don't know, he bought Twitter, and that was like the ultimate sin because he disagrees ideologically with the left on free speech, or I'm reading that wrong.
Can I pause you? I want to do. I'm pushing to do a sketch with reason. I hope that we can do this where I'm like, I just need $300 for an alien costume budget. That's all I need. And what I want to do is have aliens come down and go, we have come up with solutions to your energy problems. We call it star mining. You see, you can take the power of stars and use them in a kind of nuclear reaction. It is clean and it has infinite energy. and we're like, no, it sounds bad. We want windmills. They're like, but it's free. You can have all the power in the world and no global warming. And I feel kind of the same way about Elon Musk, where it's like, he's done more for electric vehicles than anybody in the last 50 years.
He's done more for humanity than most people in the last 50 years too. I mean,
anyway, yeah, we'll do an episode on Musk.
We can do a Musk. No, I think he is a difficult. The short thing I'll say is that it's been very disheartening to see his personality emerge, because I also have been a fan of many of the things that he's done, and the innovations that he has had his name attached to.
So I'll interject. I think we all kind of agree institutional norms. That's something that Trump is going to be an erosive force on. That's something I'm concerned on. I won't relitigate the January 6th stuff, but I was at the same point Jennings was of I can't vote for this man, and I never abandoned that position, and I am worried about that. On the death thing, one of the weird positions that I've slowly come to, Andrea, is I think, if we're looking at numbers, I can come up with no argument where I wind up thinking George W. Bush was a better president than Donald Trump. I personally like George W. Bush far more. If I were selecting a godfather for my children for multiple reasons, I would rather go with George W. Bush. I think he's probably a better human being in general. Are you
only allowed to choose former Republican presidents, or what are the rules here?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got in this hypothetical with my unborn child, I have very lofty my dog wears neckties. What will my child accomplish?
Yeah, which Republican president will be their godfather?
I think that frankly Romney would be great, although I know he wasn't elected. But
I would have seriously considered a Romney voting Republican if Romney were on the ticket.
But don't let Romney be godfather to your dog, because he'll put him on top of a car.
No, yeah, there'd be none of that. That was the left media.
The best joke of the whole thing. No, I said don't let him be a godfather to your dog, because he'll put him on top of the car.
I said I would have strongly considered voting Republican if Romney had been at the top of the presidential ticket. I think a reasonable Republican is
this is
needs.
the scary. I'll digress slightly. This is the scary thought that I've been having, because I've had this conversation with multiple friends, particularly my Democratic friends, where back in 2012 I wasn't that enthused. I just moved to New York. I was still registered in Northern Virginia, so I drove down to Virginia to vote for Romney because it was a swing state. So I voted for Romney. I liked Romney, and I didn't hate Obama, but in retrospect, I'm like, God, those were good options from my vantage point. Like, I would be very happy to have Obama or Romney if they were available again. So this is my terrifying thing for both of you. What if 20 years from now we're saying things like, God, I didn't realize how great we had it with Kamala versus Trump. I mean, given the current
now you
field,
understand my existential point.
Yeah.
Yes.
I fear that too. Yes.
Remember when we voted? I don't remember that.
Yeah, remember, I mean, Trump was just a clown in retrospect, but this new guy, Kid Rock, I mean, shit.
By the way, they're going to say that no matter what, on both sides. Like,
we'll get there.
Every single presidential candidate is always worse to the opposition than the last one. It will not matter if J.D. Vance is the next candidate.
We're seeing this
he'll
with
be
George,
worse than
we're
Trump.
seeing this with George W. Bush now, and this is where I come in and to like add some perspective here. If we're talking about deaths or the debt, both of which are very, very high on my list, George W. Bush is the worst president of my lifetime, and I'm just quantifiably, I don't know how to go in any other direction. And I like the guy personally. My dad was appointed by him to the judiciary. I have every reason to like him, but I look at the war in Iraq and I go, there's 300,000 dead Iraqis needlessly that died, and on top of all of our troops, I don't remember what the final count was, but a lot. $1 trillion. The lives are by far the most important thing, but on top of that, $1 trillion that we just pissed away in the desert to ruin this country. That country. Iraq. And then on top of that, we were looking great with the budget, and he fucked it up. Yeah. He grew the size of he grew the size of the government. He didn't shrink it. He grew it. He did no child left behind. He was a big government guy by any metric, and it was unfunded because of tax cuts. So I look at Trump and I'm like, as odious as I find him as a person, I have to say he killed way fewer people than George W. Bush did. Which is
impressive because depending on how you want to blame him for COVID, much of the what I consider to be needless deaths under his watch, that's still a lot of people.
It's nowhere near as many people
as that.
Exactly. It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot, but it's nowhere near.
You're right. You know what? I don't actually trust any media institution to be vested with what I'm about to say, but I wish there were a death toll metric that we could easily look to for presidential candidates of how many people died needlessly under your. There'd be no way to ever calculate this, right?
Well, the word needlessly is going to get us in a big tangle.
Exactly.
By the way, fun note. Do you know who in our lifetimes who deported the most illegal immigrants?
I want to say Obama.
It's Obama. No?
It's Clinton.
Really?
No, that's not true. Really?
11 million people in 8 years.
Huh.
I should say, I do not have that fact in front of me. I do want to qualify. I could be wrong.
Okay.
We should look it up. But
I know that Obama deported more than George W. Bush. However, I should also note that George W. Bush did a catch and release program where we didn't go through the legal processes of expelling people. We pick them up and drop them over the border.
That feels very have a heart trap that my parents use in rural Maryland. You know, when there's like a possum in your yard, you just catch them in a thing and then you take them to the woods and let them go. Like,
you know what? I think if you did that with a Texan accent, you could have done a really good description of Bush's perspective on immigration.
I'll work on my accent.
I bring all of this up in that as much as I don't like Donald Trump, I believe I have already lived through 2 terms of a worst president in terms of carnage and pissed away money. And so that gives me some hope here. Then there are other things where if we're putting out our emotional disqualifiers or whatever that I probably am emotionally disqualified from. I'm very consciously articulate that the president is just the chief bureaucrat. I do not view the president as the spirit leader of my country. I do not view the president as my mascot or mentor or father figure. It's literally, I view the president the same way that I view the head of the Department of Commerce, only bigger. That's it. It's just the top. It's a very important job in the same way that the spleen is a very important organ.
Sure.
But it's not this sort of it's not the top of the Chrysler building and all of society's below that. That's how I think. So for that reason, I'm a lot less worried about the cultural stuff because I see culture as just this whole other different element. But also, I'm aware that most people don't think like me, so that may not work.
I like the idea in principle, Heaton, and I would like to live in a world where I believed that to be true, and I would like to work towards a world where that is true, where they're the head of the bureaucracy, and we kind of don't hear from them unless they give like a big speech.
Yeah, me too.
I think that both sides. I don't work in the media. I have in the past, but I think that the way the media landscape and social media landscape in this country works is that we give the president outsized power / we talk about them so much that we sort of hand that power to them to live in the idea that we're just going to have to keep hearing him in our heads is very, very bad to me. And I would like to live in a world where we just all kind of ignore the president unless they're killing thousands of people. Or anyone, really. I think I agree.
Anyone. This is one of the reasons I think Canada is a great country. Is like when I first started hanging out abroad, when I was going to hostels and things, I would like meet Canadians and I go, "Is your prime minister still Harper?" And they would think about it.
Yeah, that's what I want.
And I would go, "What a great country!"
What
where you have to
legend.
think about,
right? Yeah.
Well, so we're coming up on, or we're past an hour and a half now. So I will kind of wrap this up. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to ask you both two final questions. One is there just anything that we've not talked about that you want to talk about, a comment that you have yourself, or a question that you have for your peer? I will conclude with that. The other thing that I will ask you, and I just came up with this, so I don't have this particularly well situated on my end either, but I'm going to give all three of us the opportunity to have a disprovable fear about the forthcoming Trump presidency, where we could look at it in the future and go, "Oh, I was wrong about that." I'll start on that. I think the stock market's probably going to do fine because the stock market is much more to do with just kind of general optimism and vibes. And I think Trump's been very good in that regard for the stock market. So I think the stock market will do fine under Donald Trump. But I am worried about inflation coming back through tariffs and prices. And I'm worried about economic growth slowing down because there'll be less capital coming into the country that's sort of tethered to trade. And because we will have intermediate parts that we're not able to get because all the trade tariff stuff that I will do a separate episode on. So I think that will hurt the economy and that we will noticeably see if he is able to promulgate his trade agenda, we will see a rise in prices and we will see an opportunity loss in the economic growth which otherwise would have happened. I hope I'm wrong about that. Like I'm not thrilled with President Trump, but I honestly do wish him the best of luck in terms of running the government and in terms of everybody doing well under his watch. I hope that is the case. I hope that I'm wrong. And I genuinely hope that 4 years from now, I look back and say, I think I panicked needlessly and I was, I had Trump derangement syndrome. And I look back on that and I was overdoing. I hope that's where I'm at 4 years from now. So that's my disprovable is I think the trade stuff's going to be bad.
I can assure you do not have Trump derangement syndrome. Neither one of you has Trump derangement syndrome as far as I'm concerned.
Well, maybe I've like a head cold as opposed to a pulmonary aneurysm. Like it's not like I've got a touch of it, but it's not like a fatal about. I don't know.
Well, everyone here has a touch of it,
okay, yeah.
At least on this panel.
Okay, so yeah, go. Jennings or Andrea, either one, jump in. What is a disprovable fear that you have where a year, 4 years from now, we could go, yes, that happened, or no, that didn't happen?
Jennings, go ahead. I've been going first a lot.
Thank you. I would say the thing that comes to mind is foreign policy does not turn out well, which is to say, I have my hope, I have what I think is probably realistic, and I have what I fear. What I hope is that Trump gets in and ends 2 wars. If he does that, again, at that point, I'm probably not going to put a MAGA hat on, but I might own one on my desk.
A MAGA Speedo that you can wear.
A MAGA Speedo, yeah, that's a great idea. No,
it's going to be a while before I recover from that.
Yeah, me too.
The facial expression, that was actually the most tortured Andrea has looked on today's program.
Yes, I predict the end of our country, but the Speedos, yikes.
So that's what I hope. Realistically, I don't think that he's apt to make the world a tremendously better place. I think it's apt to be fairly neutral. My fear would be that as you've put before, Heaton, that his foreign policy is basically just a dick swinging competition, and it gets us into much worse trouble than what we've already been involved in, and gets the world in much worse trouble. If I come back in a year and that's the case, I mean, I will have to eat my MAGA hat, I guess.
And I'll give Andrea just a little bit more time. Listeners at home, something that I wish I'd done at the beginning of this election is I wish I'd put in numerical order the things that are most important to me, because I think it's very, very easy in elections to get swept up with whatever your group is doing. And it's also for me personally, it's very easy to get caught up in rhetoric. I think I probably overvalue rhetoric in a way that is not helpful in the capacity that I brought up of like George W. Bush is rhetorically far better than Donald Trump, but I think there's more blood on his hands, that kind of thing. I would encourage people that are freaked out, actually everybody, if you're very excited about Trump or you're apoplectic about Trump, I would make a list of the things that you think are going to happen that are quantifiable. So like vibes are difficult to nail down, but like he will abolish the Department of Education, or he will defund it by 90% is something that we could look at 4 years from now. We will be in more wars. We will be in less wars, stuff like that, just for your own purposes, so that 4 years from now, you can see where you were at and how accurate your clock is. All right, Andrea, I vamped. Go.
You vamped. I like that you thought I needed time, but that's fine. The most falsifiable is that I think that he will put 2 more conservative justices on the Supreme Court in the 4 years of his office.
When you say more, do you mean replace Clarence and Alito, or do you mean add to like Sotomayor does?
I don't know that he'll. Okay. I'm hopeful that he won't be able to add, even though I know that we're all begging Biden to do it. But I'm hopeful that he won't be able to add to that. But I was going
to say, doesn't everybody always hope their president does that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think the Supreme
Court, there's a very good chance he'll get 3 in.
3, Jesus. I mean, the Supreme Court is already...
Jesus will be one of them.
Perfect. Well, that gets to my second. So the Supreme Court is already to the right of most Americans. And so I worry that will continue. And my number that will be falsifiable is 2. My second one is just to state for the record, this is less of a falsifiable prediction, but more, you were joking about this before. I think many of us on the left, or at least myself, I'm more nervous about J.D. Vance because I think he's evil and competent. And that frightens me. And the fact that he was able to string sentences together in the vice presidential debate was both heartening and horrifying. I felt that way a little bit about Pence, but we saw what happened to Pence. So I don't.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like there's.
We'll put a pin in that, but I just do want to say I want at some point I would love to have you tell me why you think he's evil, because I don't know that much about him, and I don't hate everything that I saw out of him. So I would like to know your perspective, because it will be informative to me.
It would be a worthy conversation, likewise. Yeah. Another one, so related to Vance, and that I think it will do, and I don't know how to quantify this, maybe you guys can help me, is I believe that we'll be seeing even more religion brought into government and the separation of church and state eroded. I don't know exactly what form that's going to take, and maybe I can come back to you on is it that we're all going to be praying in school, if we have school anymore, that sort of thing. And then the third, I also don't know enough about policy to say, but I would imagine that we will do major things to curb our efforts to protect us against climate change. And I don't know exactly what that is, but I think maybe we'll get rid of our national parks, or no more renewable energy, or more fracking in a way that poisons everybody. That sort of thing. I can come back to you on specifics.
One that I can at least avoid people getting panic-stricken about.
All right.
That you should not freak out about, because this happens every single time. So the Department of the Interior, you're going to see in a minute, Trump's going to appoint a Ryan Zinke type guy. Wouldn't surprise me if the next Department of the Interior has a background in agriculture or in cattle or something like that. Under Carter, Jimmy Carter unilaterally went, from now on, the Department of the Interior is not about managing grazing lands for America's cattlemen. It's about preserving America's environment. But the Department of the Interior was created explicitly to manage Western lands for cattle, for cattlemen, for grazers. That's it. It was an economic preservation model to allocate federal resources for purposes of business within agriculture. That was it. Carter went, no, this is more similar to the EPA. It's going to be an environmental agency from now on. And Reagan came in and went, nope, we didn't sign off on that. We're going to go right back to what we founded it on. The Republicans were never on board. We're going to do it. We're going. Everybody freaked out. This happens every time. It happened. Then Clinton comes in, and then he appoints somebody that wants to express why fields are great through finger painting, and then Bush comes back in and he puts in like a timber guy, and it happened with Ryan. So we're just telling everybody right now that's going to happen. I wouldn't freak out about it. It is very normal for the Republicans and Democrats have different interpretations of what the Department of the Interior is. As for the other stuff, I'd have to look at all of it. It's going to get complicated.
You two and your long views of history really have taken the wind out of a lot of my panic sails. So
Good.
Sorry.
How dare you think about something other than the present moment? Ugh.
Right.
Okay, this is really good. So then, final question. I just opened the floor to you both. Is there anything that you'd like to say that you didn't feel like you got an opportunity to expound upon, or is there a question that you wish to pose to your peer?
Andrea, you go first this time.
Sure. I would say one that just kind of bookmark for future conversations is I think I would love to have a conversation where we talk about comparing what is in the media ecosystems on the left and the right. I don't do, admittedly, a good enough job of tuning into the right, and maybe I would take some recommendations on what to watch. I hear this Glenn Beck guy is doing something. So just talking about the media is kind of a asterisk for the future. I've said the word asterisk more.
I for the record, would love for you to go on Glenn's show and would watch
I would
that.
too.
I actually think you would get along weirdly very well with him. I think you would disagree with him on a ton, but I think you'd like each other, and I would really enjoy listening.
Even if you didn't go on his show, it is a goal of mine for you to meet him someday.
All right.
If you spend 5 minutes with him, you guys will love each other.
I'm open to it. To love feels like a strong word, but I'm open to meeting.
The same thing happened to me because
I said.
I hated Glenn Beck. I hated Glenn Beck when I worked for Congress. I had like weird daydreams where I was like, if I had a superpower, I'd make him crap his pants on national. It was like bizarre stuff.
It's a weak superpower, but okay.
I'm not going to kill a man, but I will make him crap himself on national television. I hated that guy, and I still think Glenn's crazy. But I worked with him. And
Glenn's crazy.
Okay.
I genuinely like him, and I know that we're friends. I know this because I was drunk at a party in Austin, Texas, and somebody brought up Glenn Beck, and I was like, I'm friends with that guy. And I was like, oh God, I'm friends with that guy.
No, it would. I would be disowned by most people in my life if they even got wind that I was talking about meeting the man. But here's my question for the group, and I realize we're running out of time. But for both of you, I would love to know what is something that you're hopeful about for this country. I'm thinking politically, but it doesn't have to be.
Because Trump won, or just in general?
Just given the landscape from where you sit today, what are you hopeful about?
I think we're apt to, empires continue on until they don't. So there will be a day that this empire crumbles into the dust. It will probably not. It won't be a day. It'll probably happen over time, unless we're nuked.
Couple weeks.
This is all very hopeful so far, so I like where you're going with this. Yeah.
But I think that it's entirely
eventually
possible.
all of the idols will be kissed by the wind, and even the graven name of Lincoln will be sandblasted from history in the nuclear wastelands. Yes, continue, Jennings.
Yes, that is coming someday. But I don't see any reason to think that it is right now. And what I do think is possible, what I'm hopeful about, is I very strongly subscribe to the idea that history is just filled with pendulum moments, and we swing really far out in one direction. And I don't even mean right left politics necessarily. I mean like crazy, like we're crazy right now. And I think that it can swing back. And I think I mean, I wouldn't bet the farm on it, but I'm kind of betting the farm on it. I mean, I have kids. I want them to grow up in a world that is saner than the world that I grew up in, or that I grew up in and inhabiting now. I think that, this is why I've hammered this point that the main thing that I want Donald Trump to do is to exercise muscular foreign policy in a good way, which I do think is possible, so that we don't, we're closer to World War III right now in a lot of ways than we have been since probably the 60s. And that is very disconcerting to me. And I think it's possible that within a decade or two, we're not in that situation anymore, or at least we're further away from it. So that's what I'm hopeful about.
Yeah, I'm hopeful on foreign policy. I'm hopeful. I would like there to be a deal maker in the White House right now. This is like really, really touching a lot of live wires, and I realize that I'm in the minority on this, but I do not think that Ukraine taking the entirety of all of its territory back and being the same boundaries that it was in 2018 is really very likely. And I think the longer we prolong the conflict, we're doing it explicitly because we want to weaken Russia. And I say this because I keep talking to people that work in Washington, D.C., who tell me, yes, this is a very cheap way for us to kill several 100,000 Russians. It's very cheap for us to do this right now. And I think we're using Ukraine as collateral damage for it. And would be best case scenario, a treaty occurs in which Ukraine is able to have complete territorial autonomy, and maybe the eastern provinces are, semi-autonomous or something. I think a more likely scenario is that, look, no one's really going to get what they want out of this, that too much has happened. And so I like the idea of there being a deal maker that comes in and tries to facilitate a deal to stop the bloodshed. That is appealing to me, if nothing else, because I am, one of my biggest concerns about the Biden administration has been we're funding a proxy war with Russia. That's what we're doing. And you can talk about it's a good idea, and there's very good arguments to be made in favor of funding this proxy war, but it is a proxy war, and I could see it escalating. And so I would like to not see it escalate. I'm optimistic about that. I'm optimistic about stuff you probably wouldn't like, Andrea. I would like it if the Department of Education, if you just split it up and gave block grants to every school district in America. I did back of the envelope math earlier today. Could be wrong, but from where I was looking, the Department of Education federally gets like $238 billion a year. I think the money would honestly be better spent if we just gave every district an equal chunk. Every school district in America got $4.5 million. I think there's a lot of very poor school districts that would do well to get $4.5 million as opposed to having to hire 3 people to fill out forms to get grants from the Department of Education for some specific thing. I've like that kind of stuff. I'm hopeful that Elon Musk will actually be able to deliver efficiencies in government spending. And I do not think we have a very efficient federal government. So I'm hopeful that Trump will be able to streamline some of the extraneous stuff, cut out some of the stuff the government shouldn't be doing. That's a possibility. That might be something that I look back on and go, oh, hey, some of my policy goals did come out there. And then the other optimistic thing, I do take a long view of history, and I am very skeptical of this president and the government in general, but I'm very optimistic about the American people. I'm very optimistic about our culture moving in a positive direction. I think our culture's moved by leaps and bounds since I was a kid. I think America is so incredibly less homophobic than when I was a child. I don't think it's gone away entirely. I think there's still some really bad stuff there, but by and large, your garden variety neighbor, who when I was a kid in Oklahoma thought that gays were either suffering from a disease and we should be compassionate, or were sinners and should, not be allowed to hold office. All that major bell curve distribution is now like, yeah, it's fine. That's fine. I think that, like, in terms of racism, there's been so many incredible gains culturally that have happened. Like racism, I'm going to say more directly before me, but you go back to like 1950, like 80% of the country thought it should be illegal and was immoral for blacks and whites to get married. You look at the data, like 1% now thinks that, 99% is offended if you ask them, which is great. So I remain very optimistic about our ability as a country to prevail upon whatever economic problems you throw at us. And I'm still very optimistic about climate change. I think it's a big problem. I'm worried about it. I'm worried about a black swan event where like Antarctica rapidly degasses and we have like some sort of feedback loop. That kind of shit scares me. I'm worried about something.
Worry about? Okay, good.
I'm worried about black swan events. The gradual predictions don't worry me. Like the IPCC predictions don't worry me. I've said this multiple times on the program, but I'll keep saying it. I said this the other night when I pissed off everybody at the dinner because I was the unsinkable person there. All the climate change data is predicated on the developing world continuing to develop. That's what people are worried about. They're worried that the second and third world are going to have factories, and the factories are going to have coal, and they're going to have electricity, and that's going to burn coal, and they're going to have cars, and that's the problem. And the thing that model cannot take into account is that there are millions of Albert Einsteins and Steve Jobs and Thomas Edisons that are shoving literal shit in Nigeria right now. It's not that we're smarter than Nigerians. It's that we've got a better economy. We've got an infrastructure. We've got a system set up where our people they can't do that. The largest amount of brain power in all of human history is about to be unlocked. And we're going to have the entire globe participating in innovation and technology and solutions. And that to me is amazing. And I think all sorts of solutions to problems that we're worried about are going to be coming out that we can't see. In the same way, nobody, when I was a kid, thought that Arbor Day would become a distant memory because a defense firm in Israel would come up with USB drives. USB drives have saved more forests than any efforts that I'm aware of. Like USB, no one saw that was going to be a boon to the environment. Look at how many forests they saved. There's going to be a bunch of Nigerians and Thais and Cambodians that do whatever the next USB thing is, a snail that poops gasoline or something.
I never know what to expect going into these conversations, but I have to say I didn't expect ending on the power of USB.
Power. This is great. So we've got our three things. You've got darkness and seltzer.
Seltzer in the dark.
Seltzer in the dark. Jennings has Cape of Evil, and I have the power of USB drives. That was my thing.
That's
and
right.
I'll go ahead and end it there. Andrea and Jennings.
Well,
did I not? Did I not give you your? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. See, this is what I'm talking about. I come on this program and I get abused. Be
it known, everybody, I was stepping on the straight white guy. I was stepping on him.
That's the important thing.
I did nothing to stop it.
Yeah. So I will be brief, but I did want to get in my last
Sure, please do.
thought here. Andrea and I have now been friends for, has it been 2 years since we first talked on this program, actually?
We met over Roe v. Wade. So
we met over Roe v. Wade. It's a match made in heaven. So we've been friends, and while both of us are terrible at being regularly communicative, we do reach out occasionally. We text each other from time to time. We have phone conversations from time to time. It was, 2 days after the election that we spoke on the phone. And the day after the election, the day of and after, but after in particular, I had been, if you go to the Super Bowl and you are like me, or not go to the Super Bowl, watch the Super Bowl, and you're like me.
NASCAR.
Yeah. Why is this not NASCAR? No, if you're like me and you watch the Super Bowl, you pick your team the day of because you don't give a shit. I keep picking the Kansas City Chiefs because
Taylor Swift.
Yeah, sure. No, I keep picking them because they keep winning, and I'm like, oh, I'm going with the team that keeps winning. But I don't care. I don't watch football. So I'm not really deeply invested. And so when they win, it feels great, but I don't think that my elation is anywhere near on the level of the elation of somebody who is in it to win it with the Chiefs. Okay? That's about how I feel about this. There is something elating about being on the winning side. I go to work and everybody's happy. That feels nice, and I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. And what schadenfreude I do allow myself to experience is aimed almost entirely at the media class who bring this upon themselves, both sides, every election, to some extent, although they're still humans too. And I still, my point with all of this is what I felt the next day, far overwhelming any joy that I got out of like, oh, my team won, was there are people such as my friend Andrea who are emotionally distraught over this, for good reasons and probably for some reasons that are not real but feel real. So it was really good to, for us to connect, and I think we talked for like an hour. And I think somewhere in that conversation towards the end, I said then what I'm going to kind of say now, a paraphrase version of it, which is like, as a person who is not, I don't consider myself, I'm not a Republican. I guess I'm reasonably conservative on a lot of things. So if you don't want to think of me as a middle of the road person, I'll take the moniker of conservative, but with asterisks. As that person, as the representative here of Trump voters, let's say, what I can pledge to you is that, and we'll set the abortion thing aside because that is its own separate rights issue, and we've litigated that on this program. So set that aside for a moment. Everything else that you're worried about in terms of rights being abrogated, I am also on the side of not having them abrogated, and I will be the loudest voice in the room against Trump if he or members of his administration trample on those rights, because they're not your rights and they're not my rights. They are our rights. We're American citizens, and it is vitally important to me, and it may be in some ways even more important to me because I voted for this guy, that our rights not be trampled. And where I have blind spots, I trust people like you, my friends who see things from a different angle, to make me aware of them. So that's my final word on it.
Well put.
I'll have a final word. We're never going to leave. But just to say, Jennings, I appreciate you saying that and saying it on the record, because it really meant a lot to me in our call last week. And I tried to convey it to some friends of mine on the left, and I didn't have your way with words, and nor did it sound the same coming from me paraphrasing you. So thank you for all that. And I will say, to answer my own question, one of the things that gives me hope, and this is not why I asked it, is conversations like these and being able to, Heaton giving us a space to do this, but having a friendship with you outside of this. And Heaton, we don't need you anymore is what I'm trying to say. But
my work here is done. Time for me to leap.
No, I think that I'm hopeful that the pendulum, as you said, will swing the other way to less crazy. And I think that the more, and maybe this is the impetus that people like me needed to say, like, gosh, I live in a country with a lot of people who I see the world differently from. And that doesn't mean I have to scream and cower in alternate strategies. So I hope we have more conversations like this.
Well, and I'll add that I enjoy talking to you both one-on-one. I particularly enjoy talking to you both when you're here. I think that this is a great exemplar of good and smart people being able to communicate and be friendly and friends while discussing important issues. Foundational to my worldview and the program is that good and intelligent people can disagree on matters of substance. And I will add that one of the tips I put in my book, which, listeners, if you've listened to 2 hours of this program, at this point, I'm telling you, if you're still here, you are the kind of person that would love my book, Tribalism is Dumb, which you can get by going to mightyheaton.com/books, or just look for Andrew Heaton on Amazon. One of the tips that I put in there, and I think of you both in alternating roles here, is I think we get in a habit of, particularly in the media, of when talking about the other team, whatever that means to you, picturing the bottom 20% of stupid shitbags. Right. And it's very easy to do that. And we look at our team and we see the nuance and we see the polyglot nature of it and just how disparate everybody is. And we look at the other team, we just see the bad actors. In a country as large as the United States, with political parties as large as the Republicans and Democrats or their broader progressive and conservative corollaries, you're going to have a lot of bad actors. This is unavoidable, but you're going to have a lot of good actors. And so I find it is very helpful for me to maintain emotional equanimity by picturing the top 10%. Mm-hmm. So when I think of, when I think of progressives, to think of Andrea, because I respect the shit out of Andrea. Andrea is extremely intelligent, irritatingly more intelligent than me. I think maybe 10 to 20% more intelligent than me, which I don't like, but I'm willing to put up with.
But all right. Yeah.
And but very intelligent, and like and then Jennings, I know you better and don't think of you as any particular label, but you are a Trump voter. And so that
sounds like a label to me, but okay.
Well, I'm going to go hang myself after this conversation.
I was about to say, I wouldn't call you a Republican because I don't think you are a Republican, but
no.
You conservatarian or conservative, I don't know, somewhere in that way. But you voted for Trump, and like I think it's
conservatologist. No,
conservatologist. Yes. To think, when I think of conservatologist, Jennings, to think of you, because I think that you're a very intelligent, articulate person, and again, I take great solace from the fact that I don't listen to either of you and hear unmitigated hatred or a desire to destroy people you disagree. I don't hear that from you. And I think that most of the people in the country are closer to you than they are to the bottom 20%. And I hope that listeners have been as heartened by this conversation as I have. And I'm very grateful for your friendship and for guesting on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
And like the true coastal elite that I am going to go call my therapist. It's just a scheduled call, but that just feels appropriate for my caricature.
And
nice.
I am going to go watch NASCAR.
Nice.
And
I thought you were going to shoot something, but both. And Heaton, what are you going to do? Read
I'm
the
going to shoot the
dictionary?
TV after I watch NASCAR.
Playing the moderate, I guess I'm just going to go eat oatmeal. I'm going to go eat oatmeal.
Nice.
And,
Okay. Unseasoned, no raisins.
Unseasoned oatmeal. Watch reruns of Everybody Loves Raymond, something like that. All right. That's the show. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Eric Stipe, who edited this gargantuan episode. Thank you, Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy and Mr. Josh Jennings for coming on to discuss the election, the country, Seltzer in Darkness, Capes of Evil, and NASCAR. And thank you, patrons who make it all possible. Until next time, I've been Andrew Heaton, and so have you.